Welcome, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, I still have snow laying around, but we had a warm rain yesterday, which helped. But it's the
hmm
strangest thing seeing ice and snow still laying around like 3 weeks later, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So, but I know that y'all have the opposite thing going on in your area of the country. So,
Yeah, we sure
oh,
do. Same as last week. I think we're going to hit like 67, 68 again today. So, I mean, I love it. I think we said this last time. Like, I love it, but we recognize it's not great for the environment or for the ski results.
exactly. It's no, it's not good. And for us, it's so interesting. It's like a mind switch going on because we don't have the equipment to deal with this stuff. We don't have the staffing to deal with this because a lot of stuff has been downsized. And so having one of the biggest storms you've had in years and having fewer facilities management folks around, yeah, the snow and ice is going to lay around for a while. Like, Kendrick's feet have not touched outdoor turf in almost a month now. Like, here we are. Here we are. So,
Yeah, that's wild that he hasn't been able to
uh,
play outside with his
mm-mm,
various sports because of that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So, hopefully, this will all be gone before. Isn't that a shame? Make sure it's all gone by the end of February, even though this storm happened the end of January. That is
Yeah.
strange for Maryland. Very strange. Um, but let's dive into our episode. We have a great word of the week. So, Lisa, a lot of people know that I was a seminarian in a former life, but many people did not know that I went to a specifically Mennonite seminary, which meant that their theology was all about a pacifist approach to the world, their daily life, so forth. And so they were not interested in war. They were not interested in military. These were things that were uh, vehemently challenging to their faith structure values. And so the very first time that I'd ever heard of the word conscientious objector was in a pacifist seminary. And one of my professors, who's a wonderful gentleman, who taught specifically theology around missiology, so mission work. And so he had been in, I think he had touched all of the continents by the point that he was sitting in my class teaching. And so he had a very circumspect view of war, strife, conflict around the world. And so he was the one that put two and two together for me in regard to Muhammad Ali being a conscientious objector. And
Right,
that was the
right.
first time I heard this word. So, this word means a person who, for reasons of conscience, objects to complying with a particular requirement. And this can especially be applied to, as Muhammad Ali experienced, serving in the armed forces.
hmm
And I thought this was fascinating because we're seeing this in a number of different corners, especially of US life. A great example of this is my oldest son just got the message from a Instagram account saying that they are scheduling a walkout in protest to
Okay.
what has been happening all over the country. We're not
hmm
going to mention the exact three letters, but y'all know what we're talking about. They are protesting the treatment of folks by the three
hmm
letter word. And so, with that, they are conscientiously objecting what's going on in our country, and they're symbolically representing that by quietly and peacefully getting out of their desks, seats, etc., and walking out the
hmm
front door. I appreciate that based on the research that myself and their dad has done, it has been coordinated with teachers and advisors to make sure that everyone stays safe, that they get to actually demonstrate how they feel about things without anybody getting hurt. Because that's always the concern for me. Lisa, you and I, we've been around students for a very long time. We are not
hmm
opposed to their protests. We are opposed to people being harmed in the midst of protests. they have a voice. And especially when it's young people having a voice, ooh, that just tugs at my heartstrings, because that means they're paying attention to what's going on. And this is going to be a core memory probably for the rest of their lives. So Lisa, I appreciate how conscientious objectors are showing up more regularly, that it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be a Muhammad Ali, I'm not going to Vietnam type stance. It could be many stances, but it's well thought out, reasoned. And, it's like that saying goes, Lisa, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. That's the
Right.
first thing that came to mind for me is, what are we willing to stand for, especially when it's inconvenient for us,
Mm-hmm.
especially so. And
Yeah.
we don't know what these students are going to experience, whether they're, absences for a class, or maybe they can't replace coursework. We don't know what the outcomes are for that, but they're willing to make those sacrifices in order to stand up for things that they see that are wrong in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
just salute them for that. But Lisa, how have you engaged with this word, or at least become aware of it in your studies or experience even?
Yeah, I think I probably unwittingly have just associated it with folks who refused the draft, right, with wartime, and so they did it
Mm-hmm.
as a matter of conscience, not because of a bone spur. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then
That part.
your example of your son, I was just reading in the New York Times this past week that Texas, there's been a lot of walkouts in Texas, and the governor
Oh,
there is threatening school districts with kind of punitive consequences. I can't remember exactly whether they were going to like withhold funding or they were going to do something, but essentially for schools to not do what your son's school is doing and coordinate with the students. So one particular example they
yeah.
gave was there was a walkout, and the students did it without consulting with the teachers and the administration, that they didn't get permission to it. And
Oh my. Mm-hmm.
so they're like not complying with school policy, which is you have to get permission to do the things, because
There
to
you go.
comply with school policy puts the school at risk from the
Mhm.
state, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right.
So that
Mhm.
was really interesting to see how that's playing out. And of course, it would be Texas, right? But I think that it's, I think your point about there may be a consequence for you, right? I think the governor was also wanting students to get arrested or something. I mean, it's like bad shit crazy. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, to
Mhm.
prevent high school students, middle school students from exercising their constitutional rights for freedom of assembly and freedom of speech because
Mhm.
the governor doesn't like what it is, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes, that amongst the laundry list of things that I'm always concerned about, I am extremely, extremely concerned about how the occupant of the White House is continuing to model what is now happening to people with whom you disagree,
Yeah. Yeah.
up to and including loss of life. That to
Right.
me is what really makes me afraid for folks who choose to be conscientious objectors in places and spaces where it's most challenging. And at the same time, we know allyship doesn't happen in comfort anyway.
Right. Right. 100%.
So that type of thing. So I'm appreciative that students did kind of, I don't want to say collude with teachers and administration, but they did consult, which I think is a powerful statement of, look, this is where we stand,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't want anyone to get hurt over this. We just want to make our statement known so everyone is clear. Um, so that, unfortunately, um, as in many other cases, violence doesn't hijack the message,
Right. Right.
which I just adore about this whole process. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yes, conscientious objector, and thank you for bringing up the draft, because, of course, in Ali's case, absolutely. And yet, at the same time, it has me now going down my ticker tape of all the family and friends that I know that were drafted, that did not object, but also knowing what it would mean to object.
Yeah. Yeah.
A big name like Muhammad Ali can object in a different way from a
Yeah.
quote, quote no name
Yeah.
elsewhere. So just thinking about that and how we leverage our power to do some of this work.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Not everyone has access to conscientious objecting strategies,
There
right?
you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. All right. So let's dive into phase one. So, Lisa, I know we come from a background of sports, and more sports. This is
Yeah.
literally how this podcast was birthed, in endurance sport, particularly. But we have to talk about the Winter Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I just, oh my gosh, I've been catching bits and pieces here and there. Now, I immediately thought of you when I heard a couple of folks complaining about, oh my gosh, it's been overwhelmingly women. And what cracked me up was someone used the same language that has been used in reverse. Well, win some more medals and maybe you can get some more airtime. That's what they tried to tell
Yeah.
us for
Yep.
decades, right?
Yep.
So women have been dominating in the Winter Olympics, but this particular story that doesn't necessarily involve a woman athlete caught my attention. I said, okay, Lisa, we got to talk about this. A First of all, skeleton is like my favorite winter sport ever, okay, because it scares the crap out of me
It
every
is
time I'm just
scary.
watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scares me to death. And so that's like my favorite winter sport so far, because it just, the courage that it takes to even attempt to do that slowly is like beyond me. So yes, I'm living vicariously through these athletes. But there's a Ukrainian skeleton slider that was disqualified from the Olympics after breaking IOC rules. Now, the rule that they broke, uh, the slider's name was, forgive me, it's going to not be right, but Vladislav Harasevich, if I'm getting it even close. He refused to adhere, quote unquote, refusing to adhere to the IOC athlete expression guidelines required regarding his insistence on wearing a helmet featuring images of athletes killed
Mm-hmm.
during the war in Ukraine in competition. And
Yeah.
so the IOC's ruling that prohibits athletes' abilities to express their views during competition and in the field of play, that's what he was unwilling to bow to. And so let's talk about the helmet itself. I remember last week, I was being the worst mom, y'all. I was the worst mom last week because I saw a picture of, I forget which athlete it was that had the Venom helmet, which is my ultimate favorite.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Venom helmet that I screenshot and sent to Kendrick while he was in school. Forgive me, I was not being a good mommy at all. And he was like, oh my God, it's so cool. So here's what was going on the actual helmet. A lot of them are very cool. A lot of them are very emblematic or just give the athlete courage to do what they do.
Yeah.
This helmet in question featured a number of athletes who were killed during the ongoing war in Ukraine. And so weightlifter Alina Perahuvada, boxer Pavlo Ishenko, ice hockey player Olesiv Oganov, I believe, actor and athlete Ivan Kononenko, diver and coach Makita Kozubinko, forgive me, y'all, and shooter Alexei Abarov and dancer Daria Kurdal. All of them were featured on this helmet.
Mm.
I love how this helmet interrupted interrupted a space to say, wait a minute, we're
Yeah.
out here being able to put our skills on display to the world. I'm not going to forget what has happened in my country. I am representing my country on the highest level. And so here's what went down, Lisa. Here's what went down with the details. So the short version is IOC President Kirsty Coventry met with the athlete early Thursday morning of that week in an attempt to pretty much break up the impasse and hopefully come to some negotiation around how we can make this happen. But the Ukrainian athlete stood his ground, resulting in the disqualification. I so love that he did not bow to the rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, because that was the whole point of the meeting, was to see
Yeah.
how we can negotiate you bowing down to this rule. And so anyway, after that, there were a number of people that were just really heartbroken. They requested reinstatement. Even the IOC president said, no one, quote, no one, especially me, is disagreeing with the messaging. It's a powerful message. It's a message of remembrance, a message of memory, and no one is disagreeing with that. The challenge was to find a solution for the field of play. Sadly, we've not been able to come to that solution. I really wanted to see him race. It's been an emotional morning. And so with that, interestingly enough, later after this disqualification, Zelensky, his president, awarded the athlete with the highest civilian honor, the Order of Freedom, for, quote, his dedicated service to the Ukrainian people, civic courage, and patriotism in defending the ideals of freedom and democratic values. And so, Lisa, I've seen people bend a knee to this in other ways. So, for example, in the NFL is an example of this, not on a global stage, obviously, but there are things that they can't necessarily wear on the field during the game of play that they would use during warmups. Or like there's always kind of a little bit of a workaround with things. And the fact that this athlete chose not to engage in a workaround, it's telling, Lisa. It's very telling. And so I'd love to hear from you, because you and I, we've talked about social justice colliding with any field of play. But I want to know how you felt when you heard about this story in particular.
Yeah, I mean, from an emotional point, I think it's ridiculous that he was disqualified for having images of athletes that have been killed during this Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? But I also understand the difficulty if you have a no messaging policy, and that messaging could be benign messaging or political messaging or some other something messaging, right? Like there's no messaging. So how do you make an exception? And once you make an exception, then why is this exception different from that exception? And then we start to have inequitable application of policy, right? So I guess the underlying problem is, can you have a situation where you have, like, do they need to rework the policy to exempt messages that are about remembrance? Because I'm thinking about the US figure skater whose parents died a year ago in that helicopter plane crash over DC.
Yes.
And obviously figure skaters aren't wearing helmets, but he had a photo of him and his parents when he was very, very small. I think it might have been one of his first times on the ice or the first time, and he's being held on either side by his parents. And obviously he didn't skate with that, but he had the photograph right at the end of his one of his programs, and then when he was sitting waiting for his points, he had that held up in front of him, like, so the camera was, right on it. And so I think about that in the helmet example. So what if he had put like an image of, like, that photograph had been, like, drawn on his helmet. I mean, I'm not suggesting he would have taped the photograph, but like some representation of that image, or images of his mum and dad's face on his helmet. Would that have been considered messaging that would have been violating of the policy, or would it not have been, right? And I guess there are so many athletes that are motivated, both locally and on the international stage. They're motivated by people they've lost.
Yes.
And so I just feel conflicted, because I get the reason for a universal application of a policy, and you can't make exceptions because that creates problems. But I also wonder, when we're talking about honoring dead people, I mean, I don't mean to be blunt there, but like, I feel like that should be a little different, right? And all those Ukrainian athletes were not competing in the Olympic Games because they had been killed. And I guess it's slightly different than losing your parents, right? Because it's associated with an invasion by another country and kind of our global ineptitude at shutting it down. So I don't know. It's, I mean, I think he should have been able to compete. Yeah.
Well, here's my thing. So, me, when I'm trying to critically think about something, I try to flip it in lots of different directions. So here's the flip that I was thinking about. Okay, the IOC policy, absolutely. I'm with you 100% on, we need to revisit the policy. And I'm also thinking
Mm-hmm.
from the athlete's perspective, and clearly the president who, awarded him for such courage, that setting, in my humble opinion, seems to be the most appropriate place to do this.
Mm.
And the reason why I say that is because it's kind of like this, overgrown Venn diagram where everything that those athletes represent are represented in this place and space. They were all athletes that did not get to represent their country.
Yeah.
They are individuals where their names literally would have been lost if it had not been for this helmet being worn, or even the prospect of it being worn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the um, it makes people uncomfortable because it implicates not just, remember, we're talking about the branch and the root. The branch is the people that lost their lives. The root is, why did it even have to happen?
Right, right.
The war itself even have to happen. So all of that, and elevating it at a global stage, which would be the largest audience to remember those faces, spaces, and all of their, I mean, a lifetime of training to try to get them to that very moment that they missed because of all this. So I'm thinking to myself, my inner dialogue is saying, what would be a more appropriate place for this to be other
Right.
than the Winter Olympics? I can't think of one
Yeah.
when the
I
world
mean,
is watching.
exactly. And if you slap a Ukrainian flag on your helmet and it's on your attire, right? That is a kind of a national pride message. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fallen athletes who are unable to compete at the Olympics representing Ukraine feels similarly like a national pride thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, to me, I'm like, okay, so you mean to tell me that we're enforcing a policy to make sure that a current Olympian doesn't get to remember other potential Olympians that got their
Right.
opportunities snuffed out because of a war?
Yeah.
That to me, I'm like, hello, I think this is the most appropriate place, moment, time, situation ever to actually wear that helmet. It's the most
Yeah.
appropriate. And even as we think about going back to Dr. Sean Anderson's book on sport and social justice, thinking about how all this has shown up over the years. So usually when it comes to social justice issues in sport, especially here in the US, we think about, of course, Muhammad Ali, we think about the Colin Kaepernicks of the world, we think about a number of different names, but usually those issues have been around racial equality, definitely gender equality, like I
Yeah.
was just mentioning, LGBTQ rights, hiring practices in sport, Rooney
Mm-hmm.
Rule and all that stuff going on, but
Yeah. Yeah.
across multiple sports. The freedom of speech in and of itself, climate change that directly affects some of these people's ability to be able to participate in sport at all. If you live in a place like, imagine Utah, where that's literally the site of a previous Olympics where they still go to train for bobsled. And if the temperatures continue going the way they are, one of what I think only 3 places in the country that you can train could melt away. So, of course,
Mm-hmm.
you should be speaking up about climate change because
Right.
it prevents you from being able to participate in your own sport.
Yeah.
Hello. And so, with that, I'm like, this one is an interesting one because it certainly falls in line with a tradition of speaking truth to power around social justice issues. It just happens to be, who does it make feel uncomfortable? Like, now
Yeah.
I almost feel silly saying that Venom was my favorite helmet, because Venom is talking about a fictional character that got to show
Yeah.
up on the global scene, whereas actual lives that were lost were not.
Yeah, and there's a downhill skier, a woman. I think she's from Italy, and her helmet has like a tiger on it.
Okay.
Um, like because that's for a representation of her spirit, I guess, like and her power and her,
Uh-huh.
and I. So where are we drawing the line? Because that's also messaging, right? That's also sending a message to other athletes that I think that I'm the tiger. I mean, I think it's cute, and well,
Mm.
she's amazing. She has won gold twice, but I do think we're in some thorny territory, particularly since you're representing our country. And the IOC head said it wasn't about the messaging specifically, it was about the rules and regulations and keeping everyone safe. And I don't think, I mean, I'm happy to debate this with someone, but I don't think images of fallen athletes in a war makes anyone unsafe on the field of play. But what she's saying, I suppose, is that, again, it's that exception. If we allow this, then we'd have to allow something else that might actually make someone feel unsafe on the field of play. So it just, I think there just needs to be some distinction, doesn't there? But I'm not suggesting this is easy. I mean, I'm largely in agreement with you, Shauna. I just think there are perhaps factors that you and I are not thinking about.
Well, now, and I will say, just to throw this in really quickly, this is not the only athlete or even the only team. So we have to remember Haiti too, because Team Haiti was forced to remove one of their controversial figures from theirs as well. So Team Haiti's uniforms had a former enslaved person who organized a revolution that eventually founded Haiti in 1804. So, and I can send you the picture after this, but basically it was Toussaint Louverture that was riding on horseback on a red horse. Okay, that's the total visual. The IOC again said that the image of Louverture was violating some of their Olympic rules because it depicted a political symbol, and so their final uniforms only had the red horse without the former enslaved revolutionary on riding horseback. Interesting, because Haitian individuals will know exactly what the red horse represents, but they also know how it's been somewhat censored, right? So they are implementing this, but interestingly enough, anything that rocks the boat too much when it comes to revolutionaries is a problem.
That's curious, because I feel like they've just created a conflict, the IOC there, because you're saying, okay, take the revolutionary off the horse, but everyone who is aware of that knows what the red horse means, right? Yeah, I probably wouldn't have known what it meant with or without the person on the horse, right?
Me too, exactly.
So it's still a political statement versus I want images of athletes who aren't here because they've been killed in a war. Like, yes, that's curious. Yeah.
Well, and I want to see you and I both being, enjoying looking at policy and how it can be interpreted differently. What they're saying for this one is that competing countries must stay politically neutral.
Right.
So in the Olympic Charter itself, it says sports organizations within the Olympic movement shall apply political neutrality. Yeah. So I'm sure the athlete is saying, well, what's neutral? A death can't be neutral, but at the same time, that's the point, especially a casualty of war. So yeah, it's very interesting, but there's been so many countless times that I have not agreed with IOC on things that.
Yeah. They've definitely misstepped. Yeah,
this is nothing new. So anyway, what we would encourage you to do is go back and watch the Winter Olympics, especially because there's so many women there. Definitely go watch and see what the controversy was all about. But I think it's important to pay attention that this is performance, but always know that there are countries behind the scenes that are dealing with very real issues. Very real issues. Mm-hmm. All right. So guide us into phase 2, Lisa.
Okay, I'm going to totally do what I did last week and start the phase with something that is not connected to the phase, but is connected to what you just said.
Do it.
So when I was watching the recap of the Olympics last night, I think it was last night or the night before, I didn't know this, but ski jumping, either ski jumping entirely or ski jumping from the longer ski jump, women didn't get to do that until something like 2004. So and also like double luge or something women never got to do, and it's the first time that it's at the Olympics now. And incredible. So it just so I mean, I think I'd need to double check that, but I remember looking at the thing that popped up on the screen and thinking, how is that possible? How were women prohibited from doing that particular distance or whatever? And then cross-country skiing this year, this is the first time that cross-country skiing distances have been the same for men and women. So historically, women have had shorter races. 2026.
Incredible. Incredible. Even though it's well documented how women perform endurance sport.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Our tolerance of pain is off the anyway, keep
Yeah.
talking. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So, actually, what we wanted to talk about for phase two is we wanted to circle back on some AI discussions. So, there have been a couple of big reports, surveys, articles that have dropped in the last couple of weeks related to AI and job replacement. So, there was one very long piece in the Atlantic. Then there's been podcasts that have talked about that piece in the Atlantic. And then the Pew Research Center published a document related to how Americans are viewing AI and what it is likely to do, could do on our human abilities and how that might impact society. And I know you and I have talked about AI before, about how bias is written in there. And I think we have talked about the potential for job losses. But I think part of where I want to go with this conversation is how AI is part of our lives. It is here. It's not going away, right? So how do then we create parameters so that those parameters are not so malleable or full of holes that we see a decimation of both critical thinking, which you and I have also talked about is in a deficit in this country, and then also all of the kind of entry level roles, right? So one of the biggest concerns is that AI as a tool that can augment your work will ultimately cross over into automation. And so then all of those kind of entry level positions that are like, read this document and find how many times this thing is said, or go research this thing and do a lit review or whatever, are jobs that recent grads might get kind of at the low end, in a white collar kind of environment. They won't be there anymore, which means you're going to have people graduating from university and they're going to not have the skills to kind of jump over that entry level into kind of a middle level because they haven't had the life experience to get there, but there's no step for them to step on. And then one of these statistics that was in a recent poll, 71% of respondents to an August Reuters Ipsos poll said they are worried that artificial intelligence will put too many people out of work permanently. And if we don't do anything to regulate it, right, then it feels more and more like that is not hyperbole to say that. So I know that you engage a lot with AI, Shauna, and obviously you've got 2 kids in school and you're teaching them how to use it as an augmentation tool versus a replacement for their brain. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are around kind of this growing volume of conversation around concerns about long-term detrimental effects to our cognitive abilities and to the workforce. Oh, you're still muted.
It's a great question because no. It's an awesome question because as I'm thinking, I've got multiple layers of this going on, and none of them are places where I'm an expert. Okay. So, like you mentioned, around staying on top of what's going on in higher ed in regard to faculty not engaging with AI as much as they could and they should, which then leaves students saying, well, we want to be ethical, but you're not giving us any parameters or structure around how to be ethical with it. So we just have to figure it out on our own and then, get our hands slapped if it's not considered your version of ethical. That sounds like we're setting everybody up to fail, because then those very same students also have to fill out your teaching evaluations to tell you how that you didn't give them structure, right?
Yeah.
So higher ed is one piece of it. The other piece of it for me too is, of course, with growing kids where, their frontal lobes haven't fully formed yet. And I'm still trying to get them to a place where it's very similar, Lisa, when I was in my doc program, and I remember learning how to code themes out of raw data and literally pulling, a big cup of highlighters were put in the middle of the table
Yeah,
by our
yeah,
professor and made us do it all by hand before we learned how to do it in multiple versions of software, because she wanted us to learn it the quote unquote old fashioned way so that we would then be able to pick up on mistakes, errors, dirty
right.
data, whatever, because we had done it that way fundamentally first, right? And so I bring all that into how I try to show the boys how to do it as well, is that yes, of course you could um, ask Claude or ask Copilot or whatever version you're using for citations about this particular thing. But then because you haven't done that fundamental
Yeah.
highlighter version of this work,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you all this information and you don't know whether it's good or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's something else I'm grappling with as they start to write papers or do light research on topics and so forth. So that's another area that I'm concerned with, especially at a young age where their lives are going to be full of AI. Let's just be real about that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
then too, one of the other places that I'm grappling with this concept is actually within my fellowship. So y'all have heard about my fellowship a couple times, but within my fellowship, I have 25, 27 colleagues from all around the globe that are participating in the Trinity New York City Fellowship, which tries to bring together that intersection of faith and leadership. And one of my good friends, shout out to George. George is the CEO of the Bronx Tech Hub. And so he helps people to learn how to develop AI tools that are
Okay.
useful, um, not only developing the tools, but also training people on how to use the tools and certifying them on how to do this. And he mentioned this in one of our classes and then sent us this entire email with a list of tools, like literally sermon and teaching tools for church and faith leaders, discipleship and engagement tools, how we engage with congregants or other members of our churches and organizations or nonprofits, creating content and productivity stuff, right? So you and I taking this podcast right now, and it breaks it up into 14 mini podcasts that can then be
Right, right.
shared all over the world in different languages, in transcriptions, etc., because of this 1 hour that we've spent together. Again, what I appreciate about George's approach is that he doesn't say, here, take this knife and use it. He's saying, here, take this knife, knowing that it can be a tool, or it can be a weapon. It can be safe or unsafe. And so here's the
Mm-hmm.
structure I'm building around you so that you know how to use this very powerful tool effectively without harming yourself and other people. And that's where I feel like the breakdown is that we vilified it. And George's work is even more powerful to me, because what I've been picking up on with my colleagues is that AI, similar to a lot of things that are new, including social media, lots of things over the last, well, actually forever, but from my memory, over the last 30 to 40 years, anything new is vilified and literally deemed as satanic. And
Mm.
so with that, he's doing the work of debunking that no, this does not have to be considered theologically satanic. The only thing that's problematic is we are in fact the villains, because we have not created structure around something that could be a
Mm.
tool. And so for me, that's where I'm like, okay, I have come to the place, because you have heard Lisa and I talk about AI more than once on this podcast. I think this is one of the first times where we have like completely submitted to the acceptance that this is our future. Now that this is our future, what do we do with it versus trying to ignore it and make it go away? Because it's not going to, and the people around us are not going to allow it to go away either.
Yeah, yeah. And this Pew Research report says Americans are much more concerned than excited about the increase of use of AI in daily life.
Mm-hmm.
They want more control. They think it is going to erode our ability to think creatively and form meaningful relationships. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's this existential piece to it, I think, around how, so coming out of COVID, there
Mm-hmm.
was a well documented impact on young people, especially their ability to communicate, to engage with other people in teams, right? And
That's
so
right.
that has been a noticeable lag in those skills for young people who were, at home for 2 years with school.
Mm-hmm.
So we already have that issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, with the rise of online education, which has increased access to higher education, but has also then created, like, I'm just not physically in spaces with people if I'm doing a degree online.
All right,
Sure,
right,
in
right.
an online room, but it's just not the same. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have AI now, which could be limiting my capacity to think creatively, to understand communication, because I'm really just communicating with a tool that isn't a human,
Mm-hmm.
right? But AI models mimic, right? They can talk to you as though
That's
they
right.
are human. I mean, there's people dating and marrying like AI people, right? I think we may
Mm-hmm.
have mentioned that on the pod before. And then okay, so what's my sense of self is tied up a lot in what I do professionally, and I think that's probably true for you, and it's probably true for a lot of people. So then,
Mm-hmm.
if I am like regressing in my communication skills and my people interaction skills, and
Yes.
I am not thinking as creatively as I may have been able to 10 years ago without AI, and then
Mm-hmm.
AI takes away my role, right? Like then that's the existential thing for me is like, well then, I mean, beyond the financial piece of it, but then like, well, who am I, right? Like, because all of these developments in my personality and how I engage with the world and how I kind of construct my sense of self have now
Mm-hmm.
been stripped away. And so then do you
Mm-hmm.
know, so I mean, maybe I'm being a little catastrophic here, but I just feel like
Well,
there's this like existential thing that is looming.
well, here's my kind of counter to that point,
Mm-hmm.
because I agree with everything that you said. And here's the reframe on it, is that it's kind of like in medicine, where they always talk about taking the minimum effective dose, right? That's what
Right,
doctors and
right,
nurses, anyone that writes a prescription will say, take the minimum, meaning obviously don't take 500 milligrams when 10 will do, like,
right,
no.
right.
And so it's literally the smallest amount that's required to produce whatever you want to produce.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I want to stop my headache. I don't need 500 milligrams. Maybe I need 100. Take the 100, don't take the 500. Same thing I feel like with AI, is that we haven't employed the
Yeah.
minimum effective dose.
Yes,
So let's
yes.
say like, for example, and this is how I've actually used AI in real time, and I've seen other people use in real time. So let's say, Lisa, you and I, because I actually have a project that's coming up that might be you and I together. Let's say you and I are tasked to write a course on gender and theology.
Okay.
I will be the theology subject matter expert. You might be the gender subject matter expert, but we're kind of stumped as to where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, being ethical users of AI, would not type into some tool, hey, can you please go ahead and literally write the script
Yeah.
for 10 hours of a online course certification on gender and theology? We would not do that. To me, is the maximum effective dose that, especially as
Right,
a young person, yeah, you probably would run, because no one's giving you parameters. Your brain hasn't functioned all hasn't grown to the point of
right.
functionality. We as Gen Xers and lots of other reasons, we would have the wisdom to determine what the minimum effective dose would be. So you and I, using that very same tool, would say, we would love to have a short outline of 8 courses around gender and theology. And it would
Mm-hmm.
literally give us 8 sentences. And then you and I can go off and make hours and hours and hours of content, because AI has helped us to either spur an idea or to at least organize ideas we may have already had. But it's not writing the damn course verbatim, minimum effective dose. That's how you and I would probably use the tool.
Right, right.
That's not how folks are using the tool. And part of it is I don't always want to say ethics. I think part of it is around structured guidelines on how to use it. So I've seen in one of my high schoolers' syllabi that said, you may use AI to think through an outline of your paper, but your paper must be written on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Or your idea can be funneled through AI to determine whether it's a idea that would be the substance of a 3-page paper, which is the requirement, or larger, to make sure that you don't bite off more than you can chew for your paper. And so those types of things, that just continues to remind me that there's some folks that are out here with the maximum effective dosage, and then you wonder why you're not critically thinking, because you've taken too much of a good thing, which then makes your critical thinking crumble
Yeah.
versus just enough. Because
Yeah,
you and I,
I like that minimum effective dose. I think that's a really good way to think about it. And we have, yeah, just exactly what you said. We've failed as a country to define
yeah.
what that minimum effective dose is when it comes to AI, which then
Mm-hmm.
creates, which is, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which then will likely accelerate AI's move from augmentation to automation, which is what everyone
That's
is
right.
scared about.
That's
But
right.
so there,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's right. Exactly. And at that point, if you're not thinking about the maximum dosage that's being taken, then you also don't think through what could go wrong. Like there's one of the things I'd love to do now that I'm learning a bit more about AI is, you and I are literally trained researchers. And so I do like to put in a citation or ask for citations around a topic to see if the
yeah,
tool is actually going to give me legit scholars that have done work
yeah,
on this topic or
yeah.
not, right? Or I've seen some where it gave me a citation, it didn't give me a year, and so when I went to back end look for that citation, it wasn't even real. It just gave me a format that made it look like it was real.
Mm,
Well, without common sense, or I don't even want to
yeah,
say common sense, without minimum effective dosage of the work, you wouldn't even have thought to question or test the tool.
right.
Test the damn tool to see what's the
Yeah,
extent of it. And so, with that, if I'm talking to a middle school kid that's just trying to get their homework done, they're not going to test it to see if that's an actual citation or not. They're just going to
no,
write the
they're not.
paper
Yeah,
or let the tool write the paper. Prudence, gotta have, but again, that prudence is taught.
it
That
is.
that prudence has guidelines and frameworks. I mean, I remember, gosh, we were neck deep in social media, and there were colleges and universities that still didn't even have usage guidelines for social media. I'm like, well, shoot, it's going to be hard to rein it back in now, because
Yeah, yeah,
everybody has a page that's, password protected, that's not affiliated with your organization. To rein it in after the fact, I think, is the hardest part.
yeah. I think you're 100% right there. We have created the problem, right?
There you go.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
With no
All right.
solutions. And I think once again we have one of those situations where fear is running the show again.
Yes, yes. I think you're right. So I guess watch this space. We'll drop all these resources that we're pulling from in the show notes so you can
Mm-hmm.
either develop a solution, panic, or go hide under a table, whatever is feel like the most appropriate response to you. But
There you
yeah,
go.
so let's leave it there, Shauna.
All right, sounds good. So we gave you a lot to chew on today, but as you all know, please don't forget that you can find us on all of your social media apps, all of your podcast apps, and Unfazed Unedited. You can certainly email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or visit our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can find all the old and the new shows. So if you like this week, especially if you're an AI lover, let's see, a Winter
Mm-hmm.
Olympics lover, all the things lover, please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with folks, your friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So, Dr. Lisa, until next week.
All right, see you next week.